Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, we'll go over a few roster news and notes that I have, talk about what I'd like to see from the Silver and Black the last couple of weeks of the regular season, and then your calls and texts will close out the show. It's all coming up on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, December 28th, 2022.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome here, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen each and every day. Remember, you can find the Locked On Raider podcast free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and our subscriptions continue to grow each and every day on YouTube. Ari continues to make sure we're up on YouTube each and every day. At Ari Produces on Twitter. Make sure you give him a follow or give him a shout out. Let him know what you think. If you like it, if you don't like it, all feedback is good feedback. So we definitely appreciate that. Again, on Twitter, at Ari Produces. Today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast being brought to you by the Ultimate Football GM. This is a brand new game that I think you're really going to love. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise, this game is for you. Download the game. Visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the App Store. All listeners of the Locked On Raiders podcast get 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On. It's all caps in the game. Again, Locked On. I'll give you all the details of the game later on in the show. Matter of fact, coming up after segment number one. But let's go ahead and jump into segment number one, kind of news and notes of the day, stuff collected all the day, all over Tuesday. Also hear a little bit from defensive coordinator Patrick Graham. Now, first and foremost, not that this should be a big surprise, but my guy Jordan Schultz from The Score, he works for that website, used to be at Yahoo, been covering sports in the NFL for a very long time, hit me up on Twitter with a note saying the Raiders are shutting down linebacker Denzel Perryman. He's got a dislocated shoulder for the final two games. That should not be a surprise. We saw Denzel Perryman leave the game on Christmas Eve, and we knew that there was a pretty good chance he wasn't going to return the rest of the season. There's still reports that he had surgery right after the game. I'm not sure if that's 100% accurate or not. I've seen his social media, a little video, so it looked like he did, but I haven't heard that confirmed from anybody from the team. But either way you look at it, he's done for the season. Perryman, Schultz goes on to say, as a Pro Bowler in 2021, has once again had a terrific year. Leads the Raiders with 83 tackles this season, including a career-high 14 for a loss. So that, again, was some news that I don't think was a big surprise. Denzel Perryman is done for the rest of the season. Vinny Bonsignore also tweeted out, I can confirm that the Raiders are shutting down Perryman for the rest of the season due to a shoulder injury. Now, the thing about that is Denzel Perryman is a free agent after this season. So we very well could have seen the end of Denzel Perryman in the silver and black. I'm not hoping that that's the case, but you never know what the staff is looking for. You never know what defensive coordinator Patrick Graham is looking for moving forward. Remember, these are players that this staff has inherited. Denzel Perryman was with the Raiders before this staff got there. So I know that they've said glowing remarks about Denzel Perryman, but that doesn't mean that they're going to keep him for the long haul and give him a contract extension or think that he's a guy that deserves a contract extension. Now, again, I think he's a hell of a player. I think he's been a really good addition to the silver and black. I do think he has, a few weaknesses here and there, but what player doesn't, right? There's a lot of things that Denzel Perryman brings to the table. I would say the only thing that concerns me about Perryman is that he gets injured and misses a few games each and every year. And that's going to be the same case this year. And again, he plays hard. He plays downhill. He hits hard. He does a hell of a job. He's a vocal leader, something that the Raiders don't have a lot of vocal leadership on their squad, offensively or defensively. So I think that that's a good addition, but just don't know if this staff is going to bring him back. Gut feeling kind of tells me and leans towards they're not, but I could be wrong, and I would be pleasantly wrong if they brought him back. But Denzel Perryman, just know his contract is up with the silver and black following the season, and he's not playing anymore. So you very well might have seen him for the last time in a Raiders uniform. Now, I want you to hear something from Patrick Graham with that news, knowing that he's not playing. That means you're going to see a lot more Luke Masterson. You're going to see a lot more Darian Butler. You're going to see a lot more Curtis Bolton. So here's defensive coordinator Patrick Graham. He met with us at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center on Tuesday, and he was talking about the young linebackers and the confidence that they have in those guys and why they have the confidence in those guys.
Again, it goes back to, like what Josh talks about, like in terms of everybody being ready to go, and, the hires that Coach made and Dave made in terms of our young coaches, that's part of their evaluation process. I mean, that's what was a big part of my evaluation process, I believe, when I started off as a quality control, and when you see those guys playing, it's because the quality control coaches, whether it's on the offensive side of the ball, defense, special teams, it's really when you see young guys ready to play in this league, and they're ready for that next man up type mentality, and they go out there and they're productive. It's really, you got to look at the young coaches because they've spent the most time with them. So, Matt Feeney, Matt Edwards, those are the guys on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, they've done a good job, along with their position coaches. I'm not taking away from that, but it's the young coaches. And I mean, I'm real pleased with the progress they've shown, in this league. Matt's first year in the league, Matt Feeney's first year in the league, and just the ability to coach those guys up and help us out, with the extra time. And it's really proud of what they've done with that work.
So there was defensive coordinator Patrick Graham just talking about the young linebackers and the fact that, the young coaches on the staff have really helped put them in position to be prepared and be ready to go out there and play. And I like what Luke Masterson brings to the table. Like Darian Butler, obviously we haven't seen him as much. He does a lot more special teams than just out there playing the linebacker position. And Curtis Bolton was actually out there on Saturday on Christmas Eve against Pittsburgh, probably more times than he should have been. But you're going to see a lot of that trio moving forward. You're going to see Masterson, you're going to see Butler, and you're going to see Bolton out there more times than not. Still a question of Devon Diablo's coming back at some point this season. I don't think that that's going to happen either. Matter of fact, I don't think you're going to see, I know you're not going to see Perriman. Don't think you're going to see Chandler Jones, and don't expect to see Devon Diablo moving forward the rest of this season. Now, a couple roster moves that the Raiders did make, and this just has to do with the practice squad. They did this on Tuesday as well. They signed linebacker Austin Calitro to the practice squad, and they released guard Willie Wright from the practice squad. So they pulled a guard, got him out of there, and signed a linebacker, Austin Calitro. And, of course, with the news about Denzel Perriman, makes all the sense in the world, right? You have the guys that you're ready to go into the game with, but you also want to have somebody on the practice squad just in case you need to, just in case of emergency, break glass. So that's what Austin Calitro is there on the practice squad. That he's there to do that. So that's just the roster moves that have been made when it comes to the silver and black and the practice squad. Now, finally here in segment number 1, I want you to hear a little bit of the Raiders Roundtable, and we record this every single Tuesday at Raiders HQ. It's JT the Brick, Lincoln Kennedy, and myself. Really good stuff. I encourage you to go check it out. It's on the Raiders YouTube page. You can hear it anywhere that you get your podcast. We have it on Raider Nation Radio 920. We played it, matter of fact, at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time on Tuesday following Unnecessary Roughness. But there's this one specific answer that Lincoln Kennedy gave when JT asked him about the offense. And what he asked him was, is this possible? Can this work with Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, and Josh Jacobs, assuming all 4 of those guys are back with the team in 2023? Can the offense work all those guys somehow getting the ball when all those guys are used to getting the ball in high numbers?
I played with Charlie Garner. I played with Tim Brown. I played with Jerry Rice, all on the field at the same time. Mm-hmm. It comes down to the quarterback and the quarterback decision making. Rich Gannon, I can't tell you how many games I walked off the field after an unsuccessful offensive try where every single guy was crying that he was wide open. Why didn't I get the football? Rich Gannon came down and he's like, look, there's only one football. I've got to find a way to spread it out. It's going to come down to quarterback decision making. To answer your question, can it work? Yes. But it comes down to the decision maker who's on the field. Not so much the play caller. It comes down to decision making on the field. The quarterback has got to make the right decision. He cannot be programmed that this football has to go to Tim Brown. He cannot be programmed that this football has to go to Jerry Rice, that has to go to Charlie Garner. Whomever open, the best to keep this team, it comes down to decision maker on the field. That's how it's got to work.
So there was Lincoln Kennedy's answer. I love it when he brings up Jerry Rice, Tim Brown, Charlie Garner, 2 of those guys Hall of Famers, and Charlie Garner was a hell of a player. And it brings up the fact that Rich Gannon would tell him, hey, I got to do a better job getting you guys the ball. I got to find the open guy. And really what he's saying there, and the question that is thrown out there to anyone, and I even posed it on Raider Nation Radio 920 on Tuesday, I just asked straight up, is Derek Carr a guy that can spread the ball around, or in his mind, is he programmed to throw it to the guy that the play was designed to? If the play is designed for Devontae, go to Devontae. If it's designed for Darren, go to Darren. If it's designed for Hunter, go to Hunter, right? Is he going to be able to spread the ball around? And now Derek Carr in his career has done a good job spreading the ball around. Is he comfortable in this offense with spreading the ball around and just saying, okay, he's not there, let me go to somebody else? We know he's comfortable throwing the ball to Mac Hollins, We know he's pretty comfortable throwing the ball to Hunter Renfrow. Darren Waller obviously was a big-time target. Devontae Adams, he's still working in the mix. At moments, they have really good chemistry. Other times, you kind of question and wonder what in the world is going on. So that's one of the questions, as we know that the Raiders and the organization itself, the front office, Dave Ziegler, Champ Kelly, Josh McDaniels as the head coach, are all making a decision right now on Derek Carr's future. Is he the guy? Is he not the guy? Is he going to be with the Raiders in 2023? Is he not going to be with the Raiders in 2023? Those are questions that I can't answer. I'm waiting for the answers just like everybody else. I have a feeling that we're going to have a good idea sooner rather than later, but that's just my gut feeling. Sometimes my gut feeling is right. Sometimes my gut feeling is just gas. So who knows what it's going to be. But like I said, I'm sure we're going to find out sooner rather than later. At least, like I said, that's how I feel. So that's all I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, kind of news and notes of the day that rolled out on Tuesday. Again, I do encourage you to go check out the Raiders Roundtable with JT, Lincoln Kennedy, and myself. I think that it was a really good episode. I think all the episodes are really good episodes. It's always a lot of fun to get in that kind of a forum, that kind of a roundtable, and talk some Raiders football. So go ahead and check that out. It's available right now. Coming up in segment number 2, what do I want to see? The final 2 games of the season. On Friday, we'll talk about what I'm looking for in the specific game with the 49ers, but I want to talk about what I really want to see from the Silver and Black the final 2 games. We'll do that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is the Ultimate Football GM. And this is the game that I think that you're really going to be a big fan of. I actually had someone call my radio show and ask me some details on it because they thought that they really wanted to be a part of it as well. And it does sound like it's really cool because really you're becoming an NFL GM in this game. You're going to manage your own football franchise. You're going to be Dave Ziegler, right? I mean, that's it. You're going to go through every strategic aspect of the team. You play through the season, lead your team to glory, or maybe you don't. You hire the right coaches, the coordinators, you trade players, you make draft picks, you go through your franchise, through free agency, the draft, all the ups and downs of a season you've got to deal with. It's the most challenging and realistic game out there. Ultimate Football GM, completely free and playable offline, play on the go, and as you want and when you want to. All Locked On Raider podcast listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On. Now, that's all caps, and it's in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps. Make sure you check it out today. You want to download the game? It's simple. Visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Really want to talk about what I want to see from the Raiders the final 2 games of the season. I know that mathematically there's still a chance that they could make the playoffs. I don't see it happening, and we'll probably know the result of that before the Raiders take the field on Sunday versus 49ers. But to me, it feels like it's a wrap, right? It feels to me like this season they got 2 games to play for pride. They got 2 games to play for the name on the front of the jersey and their name on the back of the jersey, right? Now, obviously, for some guys, they're also trying to earn jobs. So what do I want to see from them the final 2 games? First of all, we know that players are going to be out. I talked about that in segment number 1. Denzel Perryman, Chandler Jones, Divine Diablo. I'm assuming all 3 of those guys are going to be out for the final 2 games. That means Luke Masterson, Darian Butler, Curtis Bolton. Those linebackers. I want to see those guys. I want to see Cleve Farrell. I want to see Tashawn Bauer and Malcolm Kuntz. Masterson, Butler, and Bolton. Those are the linebackers. Just continue to get used to and comfortable. Not saying that those guys are going to be starters moving forward at the linebacker position. I think that there needs to be upgrades all over the defense. You know, when it comes to the linebacker position, I think they need to get some real alpha dogs when it comes to the linebackers. But at the very end of the day, if they look the part the final 2 games, at least you feel confident that, hey, the Raiders have some depth behind whoever they decide as the starters. Maybe they bring Denzel Perryman back. Maybe they don't. But they need to get some real deal alpha dogs, some guys that they can lean on. But they also need to build the cupboard and get some depth, because the fact that they failed so many times in the draft, they don't have that talent in the cupboard right now. They just don't. It's really bare. So they don't have a lot of depth behind the starters. So if these guys at the very end of the day could just become depth and really good pieces that, hey, if a guy goes down, you could throw Luke Masterson in there and feel comfortable, or Darian Butler could slide in, you feel comfortable. I mean, think about this. Divine Diablo has been out for how long? He was the leading tackler of the team for a very long time. And really, honestly, I like Divine Diablo. I don't know if he's going to make it. I really don't. He didn't look comfortable in the time he played in 2022 in this system. He just didn't. I don't know if he's going to be a player moving forward. I know what Denzel Perryman is, but outside of that, I think there's a lot of questions. So if those guys can establish themselves at the very least, really good backup, at least the Raiders are heading in the right direction. They could always use the draft to continue to address and get better at that position. And like I said, I think they need to get better at all positions on the defense. Cleve Farrell, Tashawn Bauer, Malcolm Kuntz. I'm sure that Cleve Farrell is good as gone after this year, but the one thing I want to give him credit for is everything he's been asked to do, he's done at a high level. He really has, and he had me rooting for him on Saturday, right, against Pittsburgh. When he went in there for Chandler Jones, it seemed like Cleve Farrell's name was being called all the time. He's batting balls down. He's getting pressure on Pickett. I mean, he's just doing anything that he's asked to do. He's playing the role that, that Patrick Graham and company asked. And so far, since he's been a Raider, he has done just that. He has done anything that someone has asked him to do, whether it's, play the edge, play inside, drop in coverage, whatever the case may be. Matter of fact, I'm Patrick Graham. We met with him on Tuesday at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center. Here's what he had to say about Cleve Farrell and what he wants from Cleve, especially the last 2 games, and what he's wanted from him really all year long.
Big thing for Cleve, for me, he's a big physical body. Play big and physical. Do that. Usually when you put somebody in a category, you want him to do that. I mean, and he's done that. I mean, he did a good job setting the edge. He had a few plays where he power rushed their tackle, made a play in the pass game, getting his hands up. Then we asked him to drop in coverage. The good thing about Cleve is that he could wear multiple hats. And whenever you got a guy like that on the edge, that helps you, because it helps you with disguise. It helps you with what you can do defensively. And then, he's really taking hold of just studying and just understanding his role, whether it's in the pass rush, whether it's in the run game, the different positions he's playing. He's really, really doing a good job being studious and diligent, working at it. And I couldn't be happier with that. And then, we got a big challenge this week, because all those guys on the edge are going to get tested. One, you got to deal with Trent, who's the best in the league, probably. He's a point of attack tackle. You got all the formations and all the adjustments that Kyle's going to throw at you, which is always interesting. And, one thing he's going to do, he's going to run the ball. So he's going to make – and so, we got a big challenge in front of us. Last week we had a challenge with Pittsburgh, and, that was thankfully, we did some good things in the run. We got some stuff to clean up. But this week is going to be a big challenge. They got big men blocking. They got good backs running the ball. They present a lot of different challenges with the looks. So it's going to be a challenge. You look forward to that. That's why we got into this profession.
So there's Patrick Graham talking about Cleve Farrell. And again, I don't know what his future is going to hold, but I'll give him the tip of the cap where at least anything he's been asked to do, he'll never live up to that billing of being the number 4 overall pick. But man, anything he's been asked to do, he's done. He's done it at a high level. So I definitely respect that. Tashawn Bauer, I just want to see what they have in him. He looked really good in the preseason and hasn't really done anything in the regular season. Hasn't really got very much burn. Got a lot of, inactives. And then Malcolm Kuntz, a guy who a season ago in a limited amount of snaps really made the most of it. You haven't seen him get a lot of burn lately either. Would like to see what he can do as well. Again, going back to what I said about the linebackers, if those guys could be quality backups, then the Raiders are on to something. Are they going to be necessarily starters? No, but they could be quality backups moving forward. Josh Jacobs, you know what I'm going to say about him. I want to see him keep running. As long as he's healthy, let him go, right? I want to see him win the rushing title, and I don't care where he plays next year. I selfishly want him to play with the Raiders next year, but man, if he can end his Raider career, at least this contract with the rushing title, that would be awesome. Right now, after a bad performance against the Steelers, didn't get the ball too much, 1,539 yards is what he has. Derrick Henry's in second with 1,429 yards. So he's a little bit over 100 yards more than Derrick Henry, which we all know Derrick Henry could rip off a 200-yard game any day of the week and twice on Sundays. And we know Josh Jacobs is going to have a tough one this week against San Francisco. But, man, I want to see him continue to pound the rock, run the ball, because it's so much fun to see him play. And plus, like I said, selfishly, I want him to win that rushing title. In third place, 1,344 yards. That's Nick Chubb. Don't think he's going to catch Josh Jacobs. But you never know. Like I said, this week against San Francisco is going to be tough sledding for Josh Jacobs in the run game, but would like to see him continue to pound the ball. How about Nate Hobbs? I like to see him play better, more confident the final 2 games. Show who he can be. Show that he can be a starting corner on this team moving forward. I had a lot of hopes for Nate Hobbs going into the season. Then he got banged up that week 5 against Kansas City. And ever since he's been back, I think his first game against the Chargers, he looked good. He was out there and he was playing really physical. But the last few games, he has not looked good. He really hasn't. And I don't know if it's, he's still coming back from the hand injury. I don't know if that's affecting his play. If you're out there, you're expected to play at a high level. And that's the bottom line. There's he's still working his way back from injury. It doesn't even matter. If you're out there, you're expected to play at a high level. Too many times, the last 2 or 3 games, I've seen Nate Hobbs trailing plays and having to try to play catch up and giving up completions and not making tackles, right? I mean, Nate Hobbs has got to play better. I think he needs to show something the final 2 games of the season. Not saying that he's not going to be back next year, but showing that he can be a legit starter that the Raiders could depend on moving forward. Amik Robertson, he's got 2 more games to prove that he deserves a contract extension. I would love for him to carve out a nice role on this team. I don't know if it's going to be possible. I don't know if his size is just not going to allow him to be the guy that he wants to be. But, man, if you go back and look what he did in college, he had 14 career interceptions and 3 touchdowns. He's a guy that has playmaker ability. He hasn't done it a lot in the NFL, only has the 1 touchdown on the scoop and score and 1 interception off Kyler Murray that he had, what was that, week 2 of the season. So, I mean, he's only touched the ball a couple times. Would love to see him get busy with the ball a little bit more because the Raiders need guys that have no problem going and getting the ball. Amik Robertson in college did it. It hasn't translated yet in the NFL. Would love to see him do that. He's got 2 more games to prove that he can carve out a role on the Raiders roster and on that defense. How about Derek Carr? Let's talk about Derek Carr. I can't go one show without talking about DC, right? And this is not an opportunity to bash him or anything, but I want to see if he could be the guy that Lincoln Kennedy was talking about, right? Just not be programmed to throw it to one guy. Just make it happen. You know, if you find a guy that's open on whatever play it is, whatever, design it is, let it rip. Just the thing about it is, we talk about Derek Carr's future. Most likely it's already been made up in these guys' mind. I don't know what the next 2 games are going to do if they choose to play Derek Carr at all. I don't know how much he can keep his job or save his job in the next 2 games. Most likely their minds are already made up. So just go out there with a free mind. Don't think, just go let it rip. Don't worry about it. If the worst comes, if Derek Carr goes out there and lets it rip, doesn't think about it, and has a bad game, well, guess what? He's had bad games anyway, and he's clearly thinking about it. I feel like the last 2 games, he's thought about all the reports of Derek Carr might not be back next year. It seems like he is definitely in his own head. Man, you got to stop that. Get out of your own head. Just go out and play. If they like you, they like you. If they don't, they don't. Right? I mean, at the end of the day, there's nothing he can do to change it. He's either going to be who he is or he's not. So just go out there and show who you can be. Let it rip. And one other thing, when it comes to Davante Adams, he's got 88 catches on 160 targets. James Jones told me in the press box a couple weeks ago that all those targets are not created equal. And what he meant by that is in the game that we were sitting there watching from the press box at Allegiant Stadium, there was about 4 throwaways that Carr had in Adams' direction. Those all go down as targets. Those aren't real targets. Those aren't really catchable targets. There's a website that someone hit me up, fantasypros.com, and they have listed, and look, this is like a Pro Football Focus, so they grade balls on what they believe is catchable and what's not. They said 95 of those 160 targets that Davante Adams has on paper were actually catchable. Now, I don't believe that there's been 65 throwaways that Derek Carr has thrown in Davante Adams' way, but I do believe there's a big chunk, like probably 30 or 35. So give Davante some real targets. Like he had 9 targets on Saturday against the Steelers. I don't believe that 9 of those balls were catchable. Matter of fact, I believe maybe 4 of them, and he caught 2. Right? I know that there was one that Derek overthrew him on the sideline that could have been a touchdown if he hit him, but he overthrew him. There was one early in the game, he sailed it. Davante didn't even jump to try to get it because it just sailed smooth over his head. There was like 3 of those. There's some throwaways, just like what I'm talking about. So I don't think that all targets, I know all targets aren't created equal. Just, Derek, give Davante some targets that are catchable balls. Real targets, I'd like to say. If you're going to target him 9 times, give him 9 catchable balls and see what happens. See what this offense could look like. And Darren Waller, this will be my final little thing I'm looking for the final 2 games. Play more snaps. Play more snaps in the final 2 games. He had a lot of the season off. He's already got paid. Just go out there and do what you do. He played 21 snaps against the Steelers on Christmas Eve. That's not enough. That was a game that I thought Darren Waller could really have a big game. You saw him make that real tough catch right before halftime. I want to give him all the props in the world for that. That was a very difficult catch. But he's got to be out there more than 21 snaps. Matter of fact, he's got to limit how many times Foster Moreau is out there, right? Foster's getting a lot of targets that Darren would be getting. He's got to play more than 21 snaps. If they have 60 snaps offensively, he's got to be in at least 35 to 40 of them. I think minimal. Look, there's only 2 more games left. You got all offseason to rest, right? Just, hey, man, stones to the wall and go make it happen. So that's what I'm really looking for the final 2 games. I know it sounds like a lot, but I don't think it is. I think that these guys owe it to the fan base. I think they owe it to themselves to go out there and put it all on the line and do what they do. So that's what I got for you. Again, what I'll be looking for the final 2 games. On Friday, I'll talk about what I'm looking for in this game on Sunday versus San Francisco, New Year's Day, Allegiant Stadium. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and text straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 4693. Before I get to that, though, do want to tell you about some podcasts made available by Audible. Audible's releasing a slate of new football podcasts that I'm sure you're going to love. They're going to be available, and they are available from some of the best talents out there. This one's including Richard Sherman and Taylor Rooks. Richard Sherman, we know, he's just a fantastic player, knows how to break down the game, and Taylor Rooks is a rising star. She's on the come up. Matter of fact, she's probably already there. Right? So a lot of really good commentary in this podcast. They have a bonus episode on Locked On NFL right now. It's called The League. You can check it out. They've got stories going back to the 1940s. They got stories about the Cowboys, the 77 Cowboys. Bruce Lee is interjected in all this. They've got stories galore. All you got to do is check them out. Each story offers equal parts history, entertainment, and social commentary. What you got to do is head over to Locked On NFL for a bonus episode of The League, or catch the full series wherever you get your podcast. It's available right now. Check it out. Audible. Get in the game. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Don't have a lot of time for calls and texts. I went a little bit long there in segment number 2, so we'll just get a couple of calls and texts in, and then we'll continue throughout the course of the week. But let's start things off real quick. EMC Raider, he's calling to talk and ask about Derek Carr and has a question for Raider Nation. Here he is, EMC Raider.
Hey, Q, how's it going? EMC Raider, first-time caller, long-time listener. My question is to Raider Nation, and why the disrespect and the hate towards a quarterback who's given it his all, has tried to do everything he can to win for this organization. Fans are taking out a 20-year problem on a 9-year quarterback. This organization is a mess. It has been, and it continues to be. And I hope that Mark Davis is making the right decision. I hope that this isn't going to set the organization back for another 10 years. Josh McDaniels is still trying to figure out how to win in December. I feel like he's been trying to figure out how to win since he last was on the Broncos in December of 10, whenever that was. I don't remember. I'm just saying we can sit here and blame the quarterback because that's the easy thing to do. But it's time to wake up, Raider Nation. It's time to wake up. All right, Q, you take it easy. I appreciate everything you do.
Thank you so much for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And honestly, it's not really about blaming DC, and if it comes off that way, at least for me, it shouldn't. He's done great things for the organization. I've said it a million times. The minute he took the field in 2014 to even right now, he has stabilized that quarterback position. That was a big-time quarterback carousel. It feels to me, and I know we have this conversation almost every year, replace Derek Carr, get rid of Derek Carr, he needs to go. I know that conversation's out there every year, but this year it just feels different, doesn't it? To me, it does. At least it does to me. It just feels like there's a real deal chance that he's not back in 2023. And I didn't believe that at the beginning of the season. If you remember, if you go back and listen to these podcasts or my radio show or both from back in the early in the season, I thought there's no doubt he'll be back in 2023 and he'll have a rookie quarterback sitting behind him trying to learn. That's what I thought. It doesn't really feel like that as of right now. But again, that's just what my gut feeling is telling me. That doesn't mean that it's right. Thank you so much for that. But at no point is I don't think anyone trying to blame DC for anything. If anything, he'll always be considered, honestly, a Raider great. At least I would consider him a Raider great because he did, 9 years, man. 9 years is a long time with a lot of ups and downs and roller coasters and, unstable organization. He did yeoman's work, similar to what Matt Stafford did with the Lions. And nobody begrudges him for leaving the organization and asking for a trade and going to LA and winning a Super Bowl. Nobody in Detroit does because they know he gave it his all while he was there. So thank you so much, EMC Raider, for that call. I appreciate you. Next up, I got a text from Dave B in the 757. He says, Q, I agree with you that there may not be a good option available if we do move on from Carr. You mentioned a couple of possible quarterbacks, Brady, Jimmy G, Rodgers, but here are other free agent quarterback options next year. This is from Spotrac.com. Daniel Jones, Geno Smith, Mike White, Taylor Heineke, Lamar Jackson, Gardner Minshew, and Baker Mayfield. Of that list, most affordable, viable options I'd pursue and not give up draft capital are Mike White, and Gardner Minshew. So basically saying that's who he'd pursue, not give up draft capital, and not give a large contract to. I'll tell you right now, and thank you, Dave B, for that text. None of those cats interest me. Daniel Jones, no thanks. I think he stays in New York, but no thanks. Geno Smith, I don't believe the hype. Mike White, he's a good player, but if you're just going to go and try to get a good player, you might as well keep your quarterback that you have. Taylor Heineke, no thanks. Lamar Jackson, Yeah, I would love to see Lamar Jackson in silver and black, but that's going to take, as you mentioned, tons of draft capital and a whole lot of fettuccine, right? A whole lot of money is going to have to go to Lamar Jackson to get him to be, the quarterback of any other team besides the Ravens, and it's going to take a lot of money to get Lamar Jackson to be the quarterback of the Ravens. So there's that. Gardner Minshew, hell no. Baker Mayfield, I'm not a fan of. I know some people in Raider Nation, I know some beat writers have talked about Baker Mayfield. No thanks. I think he would love being in Vegas, but I'm kind of no thanks on him. So really, out of those guys, I don't see anybody. I think it's more Brady, Jimmy G, or Rodgers that we were talking about earlier. And I feel like Jimmy G is a lateral move at best, and he's always injured. So what are you really going to get from him? Maybe Brady because he knows the system, but he's so old. And I hate to say it because every time we put dirt on him and say he's done, he ends up not being. But I just think that Brady's just about done. Rodgers, that's a whole lot of money on his contract, and you have to go draft capital to go get him. So I really don't see where the options would be, and that's why I have a lot of confusion on what direction the Raiders would go if they do choose to move on from DC. Thank you so much for that text. I do appreciate you. One more call. Raider Cease in LA. He's calling to talk about the car situation, Josh Jacobs, and also one possession losses. Here he is, Raider Cease in LA.
Hey, Q, it's Raider Big C from LA. This is my take. I say car stays. You know why? Who's going to understand that system? Who? Like you said, I've said to everyone, you want to get rid of Carr, but what you going to do? What's the backup plan? But hear me out. Yeah, Raiders have that option, 4 or 5 days after Super Bowl to see if they want to keep him or cut him. I think what they do is they go to Carr and be like, look, Carr, here's your options. 1, we trade you. 2, you take a pay cut, and we try to figure this thing out and give you 1 more year. However, we're bringing in a young quarterback to get him ready. As I told my coworker, he's a big Rams fan. I was saying, the problem might go the Andy Reid Mahomes treatment. Remember, Alex Smith was there. They got Mahomes. And the next you know, Mahomes became Mahomes. I hate to say that, but I think that's what they need to do for the Raiders. They got to get rid of Carr, but do it in a way where we're going to give him 1 more chance. But again, it's going to be more like you come back, we'll take a pay cut. You're not even guaranteed starter right now. We're going to draft a quarterback and see what happens. And Josh Jacobs, man, that's going to hit me hard if he has to go, but I understand. But maybe they can rework something. You know, you look at all these losses, right? 1 possession game. You look at Minnesota, 11-0 in 1 possession game. It's just how the ball flips here and there. But in the end, that's what you do with Carr. That's my solution. Say, you can trade it, or we cut you, or you take a pay cut, we'll bring in a quarterback, and we'll see what happens. Give it another shot. But you're not guaranteed to be a starter going into next year. Raider Big C from LA. Out.
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. A couple things here. Not sure if he can or is willing to restructure his deal when it comes to Derek Carr. He just got that extension. It hasn't kicked in yet. He has a no-trade clause, so he has to approve any destination that the team wants to send him. Just can't send him to, like, say, the Jets, because he might say, no, I don't want to go, right? I mean, and honestly, I think that affects how the Raiders could try to trade him anyway, because if I'm a team that wants to trade for Derek Carr and I know that his list of teams that he would be willing to go to is probably limited and he's got to approve it, if I'm a team, say he wants to go, just throwing something out there. Say he wants to go to Seattle. I'm not saying he does, but just say he does. And if I'm the Seahawks, I'd say, okay, I'll give you a 3rd and a 6th. And the Raiders say, no way. We're not going to move on from him from anything less than a 2nd and a 4th or whatever the case may be. They can say, okay, but what are your other options? Right? And then you have to hope that there's another team that Derek would approve a trade to that is willing to give up more. And I'm not saying that there isn't, but I'm also not saying it is. Derek's in a really good position with that no trade clause. So that's something. They could draft a guy, right? That's something that I've talked about before. They could draft a guy. Ideally, I think that would be what they do. Draft a guy and just let him sit. And when they could put him into the mix, then they put him into the mix. I just don't know what that $40 million price tag, they're willing to invest that money and go and get a young quarterback and let him sit. I don't know if they're going to say that, hey, that $40 million is worth it or it isn't worth it, right? That's the decision. And the business side of things is what makes this so muddy. If it wasn't a contract situation, if that wasn't the deal, I would definitely say there's no doubt that he's back in 2023. But that $40 million is something that, is going to make this business side of things and make it a lot more difficult as far as the decision goes. So who knows? And then on top of that, right now they're slotted to draft at 9 or 10. Well, you're going to get maybe the fourth best quarterback at that, so you probably have to trade up to go get one of the guys like Bryce Young or the Ohio State CJ Stroud or Will Levis from Kentucky. Those are the top three in my opinion. You'd have to trade up to go get those guys. So now you're giving up draft capital again. So I mean, there's so much that goes into this. I don't envy Dave Ziegler. Like we talk about the ultimate GM that game. I'm glad that we can do that in video game form and not have to really try to be Dave Ziegler. He's got a lot on his plate to figure out between now, the Super Bowl, the 5 days after the Super Bowl when they got to make a decision on DC, and of course putting this roster together and working their way up to the draft. He's got so much on his plate. I am not jealous at all. So that's what I got time for on today's show. Got plenty more calls and texts to get to, some more tweets as well. We'll do it later on this week. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have the crossover edition as we fully turn our attention to the San Francisco 49ers in Week 17 action. Allegiant Stadium. It's going to be a tough game, but we'll break it on down. We'll talk about storylines. We'll talk about the matchups. We'll talk about the game flow. And hell, it's the old Battle of the Bay. How can you not get excited and get your juice flowing for the old Battle of the Bay? I know I'm fired up. I'm glad it's a home game. I'm glad it's Allegiant Stadium, and I'll be in the building. So it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about, and hopefully it's a lot of fun to be at on Sunday as well. But we'll do that on tomorrow's show. Again, thanks so much for making the show your first listen each and every day. Remember, you can find the Locked On Raider podcast free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Thanks to Ari at Ari Produces on Twitter. Thank you very much, Ari. You are the man. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.